Before Google or Wall Street defined American power, a quiet bookkeeper from Cleveland engineered a fortune so vast it rivaled national economies. John D. Rockefeller didn't just dominate oil, he mastered control itself, reshaping government and society in his family's image. This is how the dynasty at the center of America's wealth, politics, and ambition came to rule an age, and why their true influence remains hidden in plain sight. But how does a single family move from obscurity to building the very foundations of modern America? John D. Rockefeller arrived in Cleveland as a teenager with little more than his father's lessons in thrift and a relentless drive to get ahead. By 1859, at just 20 years old, he had saved $1,000, a fortune for the son of a traveling salesman. That same year, the first oil well struck black gold in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and Rockefeller saw an opening. He pooled his savings with a partner, Maurice B. Clark, and launched a commission business buying and selling produce, then quickly pivoted to oil as the market exploded. In 1863, Rockefeller and Clark, along with chemist Samuel Andrews, opened their first refinery. The business grew fast, but so did tensions. By 1865, disagreements forced a split, and Rockefeller faced his rivals at a public auction. With $72,500, much of it borrowed, he outbid them all, taking full control of the refinery and renaming it Rockefeller and Andrews. He brought in his younger brother William to manage a second plant, the Standard Works, which soon outperformed every other refinery in Cleveland. Rockefeller's approach was methodical. He tracked every penny, cut waste at every turn, and reinvested profits to expand. But ambition alone would not be enough. In 1867, he recruited Henry Flagler, a businessman with deep connections to banks and investors. With Flagler's capital and strategic mind, the partnership, now Rockefeller, Andrews, and Flagler, began acquiring competitors, always looking for ways to refine oil more cheaply and ship it more efficiently. By 1870, Rockefeller and his partners formalized their hold on the industry with the creation of the Standard Oil Company of Ohio. They focused not on drilling, but on refining, where margins were highest and efficiency paid off. With every new acquisition, every improvement in process, Rockefeller's grip tightened. The path from a cramped Cleveland office to the heart of America's most powerful corporation was not built on luck. It was built on calculation, discipline, and a willingness to outlast and outthink every rival. In 1916, John D. Rockefeller reached a milestone no American had ever seen before. His fortune crossed the billion-dollar mark, a sum so large it dwarfed the annual budgets of entire states. Newspapers struggled to convey the scale. Some compared his wealth to the U.S. Treasury itself. At a time when most Americans earned a few $100s a year, Rockefeller's personal ledgers recorded assets that, if stacked in cash, could have paved a road from New York to Chicago. Yet behind the numbers stood a man who confounded the public imagination. Rockefeller's daily life bore little resemblance to the extravagance of Gilded Age peers. He kept to a strict routine, rising early, eating simple meals, and recording every expense in his own hand. Visitors to his home found no gold-plated banisters or armies of servants. Instead, they saw a quiet discipline, shades drawn, ledgers open, the air of a counting house rather than a palace. This contrast fueled rumors and suspicion. How could a single man accumulate such immense power and remain so hidden from view? Rockefeller rarely spoke to reporters. He avoided the social circuit and gave few interviews. His philanthropy, still in its early stages, was conducted behind closed doors, with checks written in careful script and donations often made anonymously. By the time he was declared America's first billionaire, Rockefeller had become a symbol as much as a man, a figure both admired and feared. His wealth seemed to bend the rules of the age, raising new questions about the limits of private power. The country watched, awed and uneasy, as the scale of his success forced a reckoning with what it meant to be rich in America. Standard Oil's dominance rested on more than relentless expansion. Its real advantage was the mechanics of control, systems so precise and calculated that rivals stood by while the ground shifted beneath them. At the heart of this machinery stood the South Improvement Company, a quiet alliance forged in 1872 between Standard Oil and three major railroads, the Pennsylvania, Erie, and New York Central. The arrangement looked simple on paper, but it was devastating in practice. Standard Oil agreed to ship the bulk of its refined oil through these lines, guaranteeing the railroad's steady business. In return, the company received rebates, secret discounts that slashed transportation costs by as much as 40% below what independent refiners paid. For every barrel shipped, Standard Oil pocketed a rebate. Even more insidious, the South Improvement Company collected additional payments called drawbacks on oil shipped by competitors. That meant every time a rival sent a barrel to market, Standard Oil profited twice, once from the rebate and again from the competitor's own shipment. The numbers told the story. Where an independent might pay $2 to move a barrel of oil from Cleveland to New York, Standard Oil's net cost could drop to $1.50 or less. With margins this wide, Standard Oil could undercut any price, buy out rivals at a discount, or simply drive them out of business. The scheme was enforced with the precision of a cartel. The railroads divided the market among themselves, 45% to the Pennsylvania, 27.5% each to Erie and Central, and Standard Oil adjusted its shipments to keep the quotas balanced. The company also invested in its own pipelines and tank cars, further tightening its grip on every stage of transport. Contracts signed in 1874 spelled out the terms in black and white: uniform pricing, preferential access to facilities, and the power to dictate who could compete and who could not. For independent refiners, the reality was inescapable. Competing against Standard Oil meant paying more at every turn, more for shipping, more for crude, more for market access. The company's integration of refining, transportation, and distribution left no weak link. By the mid-1870s, Standard Oil's control was not just a matter of scale, but of engineering. The machinery of monopoly ran quietly, efficiently, and without mercy. In 1902, a quiet but determined writer named Ida Tarbell began publishing a series of articles that would shake the foundations of American industry. Her investigation, serialized in McClure's magazine and later collected as The History of the Standard Oil Company, exposed the inner workings of Rockefeller's empire with a precision that left little room for denial. Tarbell traced secret railroad rebates, predatory pricing, and the systematic destruction of competitors, naming names and printing private correspondence. Her father, once a small refiner himself, had lost everything to Standard Oil. For Tarbell, this was not just reporting, it was personal. The public devoured her revelations. Editorials thundered, politicians demanded action, and the word trust became a byword for unchecked power. The government, long wary of confronting Standard Oil, could no longer look away. State attorneys general filed lawsuits. Congressional hearings dragged company executives into the spotlight. In 1906, the federal government charged Standard Oil with violating the Sherman Antitrust Act, accusing it of restraining trade and monopolizing the oil industry. The legal battle lasted 5 years, culminating in a landmark decision. On May 15, 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil must be dismantled. The verdict named 34 separate companies to be carved from the trust, among them future giants like Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, and Amoco. The ruling was decisive, yet the irony ran deep. Rockefeller and his associates received shares in all the successor companies. As the market absorbed the news, the value of these shares soared. Standard Oil's total capitalization before the breakup stood at $1.1 billion, a sum equal to 6% of the entire U.S. stock market at the time. After the split, the combined worth of the new companies quickly surpassed that figure. What was meant as a public reckoning became, for the Rockefellers, a windfall. The monopoly was gone, but the wealth and its reach only multiplied. The age of direct industrial control ended not with a whimper, but with a paradox. The empire fractured, yet the fortune grew. April 1914. In the foothills of southern Colorado, gunfire and flames swept through a tent colony of striking coal miners and their families. The Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, owned by the Rockefellers, had become the center of a bitter labor dispute. When the dust settled at Ludlow, 60 people lay dead, among them women and children who perished as the camp burned. The nation recoiled in horror. Newspapers splashed the massacre across front pages, and public outrage reached the highest levels of government. Responsibility landed squarely at the feet of John D. Rockefeller Jr., who had overseen the company's response from New York. He was summoned before Congress, grilled by labor leaders, denounced in the press. For the first time, the Rockefeller name was not just linked to power, but to tragedy. The shock of Ludlow left a permanent scar. For John D. Rockefeller Jr., it forced a reckoning. He began to question whether force and secrecy could secure the family's place in American life. The answer, he decided, lay in a new direction, one that would trade the tools of industry for the promise of public good. In 1913, just months before the violence in Colorado, the family had secured a charter for the Rockefeller Foundation. Its stated mission was broad: to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. After Ludlow, the foundation's work became urgent and personal. Hospitals, universities, and medical research centers soon carried the Rockefeller name. The foundation's reach extended across continents, funding efforts to fight disease, improve education, and support scientific discovery. Philanthropy became the new language of influence. Where Standard Oil had once pressed for dominance, the Rockefeller Foundation pursued legitimacy. John D. Rockefeller Jr. poured himself into this project, guiding the foundation's early years and shaping its priorities. The family's giving would total hundreds of millions, an amount that rivaled the endowments of entire states. In the wake of crisis, the Rockefellers set out to rewrite their legacy, not by denying their past, but by building institutions meant to last far longer than any oil empire. By the middle of the 20th century, the Rockefeller fortune no longer flowed through a single pipeline. Power had been reimagined and redistributed across new frontiers, politics, banking, and even the environment. Nelson Rockefeller set up his headquarters in the heart of Manhattan, occupying offices high above Rockefeller Center. From there, he launched an ambitious political career, first as governor of New York in 1959, then as vice president of the United States from 1974 to 1977. Nelson's style was bold and public, blending philanthropy with policy and using the family name as both shield and sword in the corridors of American power. David Rockefeller, his younger brother, took a different route. In 1955, he orchestrated the merger of Chase National Bank with the Bank of the Manhattan Company, creating one of the world's largest financial institutions. As chairman and chief executive officer, David transformed Chase Manhattan into a global force, opening branches in more than 50 countries and forging relationships with heads of state, central bankers, and oil ministers. The bank's headquarters, One Chase Manhattan Plaza, rose as a modernist monument to international finance, its marble and glass reflecting the family's new role as power brokers on the world stage. Lawrence Rockefeller, meanwhile, looked to the future. He invested early in emerging technologies, aviation, electronics, and later computing. Lawrence became a pioneer of what would later be called venture capital, backing companies that shaped the post-war economy. He also championed conservation, helping to establish and expand national parks from Wyoming to the Virgin Islands. His approach blended business with ecology, quietly influencing the nation's landscape and its ideas about stewardship. Each brother pursued a separate domain, but the strategy was deliberate. Where monopoly had once meant single-minded control, now it meant presence everywhere. At the ballot box, in boardrooms, across the world's capital flows, and in the wild spaces set aside for future generations. The Rockefeller name became more than a legacy of oil. It was now a map of American influence, drawn across politics, finance, and the environment. Stone, glass, and steel became the new language of Rockefeller power. In the hills above the Hudson, Kikuit rose as a private fortress, a sprawling estate begun in 1906 and expanded through the 1930s. Its terraces, sculpture gardens, and limestone facades stood for more than comfort. They announced a dynasty's intention to last. 4 generations called Kikuit home, hosting presidents and artists beneath its vaulted ceilings, its galleries lined with art collected from around the world. In Manhattan, the family ambition reached a different scale. Rockefeller Center broke ground in 1931 as the Great Depression emptied bank vaults and shuttered businesses. Against that backdrop, John D. Rockefeller Jr. poured over $100 million of personal funds into a city within a city, 14 Art Deco towers completed by 1939, crowned by the RCA building. The center's plazas and murals projected confidence in the nation's future, even as breadlines stretched across the city. By 1961, the skyline had a new anchor, One Chase Manhattan Plaza. David Rockefeller, now a titan of banking, commissioned the 64-story tower as a headquarters for global finance. Designed by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, its marble plaza and soaring glass walls reflected a shift from oil to money, from industrial power to financial command. In each structure, the family's wealth found shape and permanence, monuments meant to outlast any single fortune. Institutions became the Rockefellers' answer to time. In 1940, the family's third generation established the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, a new kind of engine designed to channel collective wealth into lasting influence. Its charter set out a structure that required family participation across generations, with governance passing not by inheritance but by board appointment. By the 1970s, the fourth generation, the cousins, held the majority of seats, shaping policy and grant-making long after the original founders were gone. The system was built to outlast any single name. As direct control over oil, banking, or real estate faded, the family's presence endured through the fund and its public-facing assets. In 2018, the playhouse at Kai Kuit was transferred to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, joining the Pocantico Center as a living symbol of stewardship. The estate's stone walls and the fund's bylaws became twin pillars of continuity, a dynasty maintained not by a single hand, but by the deliberate machinery of institutional permanence. Today, the fingerprints of the Rockefeller dynasty still mark banks, universities, and global energy giants. As private fortunes now rival entire nations, the question of who truly shapes society remains urgent. Power, once concentrated in oil and marble, now flows through data and capital. The architecture of influence endures, only the names at the top have changed. What legacy will the next dynasty leave behind? Share your perspective below.